The legendary winning streak of Bill Goldberg is near mythical in the pro wrestling world, and when it comes to the truth or the legend, you always print the legend. But not on ListMania Wrestling you don't. Not only are we going to discuss when Goldberg's streak actually ended, we are going to tell you every single no match Bill Goldberg lost and how and even why he lost them. So this Goldberg list will not include Battle Royals, and they don't include no contests, as they don't count, as they were numerous non-finishes to Goldberg's matches throughout his WWE and WCW careers, whether in singles or multi-man matches. The definitive no contest list is Disco Inferno, Bam Bam Bigelow, Scott Hall, Kevin Nash, Scott Steiner, Bret Hart, Sting, Diamond Dallas Page, Hollywood Hogan, Ric Flair, Kane, Batista, Shawn Michaels, Randy Orton, and Triple H. In all seriousness though, the streak of winning, if we start it from Bill Goldberg's televised debut, actually ends at 7. His 8th match went to a no contest with Disco Inferno, thereby making Goldberg's official streak 7-0-0-1. Wins, losses, draws, and no contests. So that is clearly a less catchy tagline, but technically speaking, Goldberg's streak wasn't a winning streak, but rather a not losing streak, as he would go on to have a number of no contests before losing to Kevin Nash at WCW Starrcade 1998. So the first one we're actually unsure of, but Ernest the Cat Miller claimed on WSI that he beat Bill Goldberg in early 1997 on a house show in Charleston, West Virginia. So did you ever wrestle a pre-television debut Bill Goldberg?
Yeah, and I beat him.
Oh really?
They put me over on him.
Number 2 was his absolute definitive first confirmed loss, Chad Fortune, a dark match on WCW Saturday Night in 1997. Number 3, Kevin Nash, Starrcade 1998, perhaps the greatest, most damaging single creative blunder in WCW history. A short while before Bill Goldberg lost his WCW Heavyweight Championship to Kevin Nash at WCW's version of the WWF's WrestleMania, Kevin Nash was enticed to join WCW's creative booking team. The booking team, better known now as the creative team, were the people responsible for the matches being put together, including who and how somebody won or lost, the stories that would play out on the show, and formatting what would happen when. Reluctant to take on creative duties at first due to not wanting to be blamed for WCW's already failing fortunes compared to the WWF's rapid comeback in the Monday Night Wars, and also struggling to coexist with WCW top dog Hulk Hogan due to Hulk Hogan having complete creative control in WCW, Nash soon had a change of heart when WCW offered him a pay raise. Nash then joined the booking team and, not surprisingly, immediately started writing himself to go on a winning streak of his own, before booking a collision course with Goldberg at Starrcade. Thanks to interference for NWO wannabe Disco Inferno, NWO founder Scott Hall, and a cattle prod, Bill Goldberg's legendary streak, and with it Goldberg's drawing power, was burnt to the ground. Former WCW booker Kevin Sullivan said it best when he said that Goldberg was the golden goose and WCW strangled him. Kevin Nash then headlined the Georgia Dome WCW Monday Nitro event against Hulk Hogan 8 days later, and that is where what is known as the finger poke of doom happened. In a nutshell, Nash and Hogan, who took on the match last minute while still wearing his street clothes and storyline, in lieu of Goldberg being stuck at the pedestrian crossing, prodded Nash in the chest. Nash then took an enormous bump and let Hogan pin him. Then Nash, Hogan, and the fractured New World Order group members all celebrated in the ring as one, with new WCW World Champion Hollywood Hulk Hogan once again its leader. Goldberg finally made it to the building to clean house, only to get cattle prodded again and spray painted. And if that wasn't bad enough, Scott Hall spray painted Goldberg's head after Bill pleaded with him not to, so Goldberg had to take a bunch of post-show photos with friends and old NFL work colleagues with black paint on his bonds. After this unsatisfying debacle, WCW of course offered Kevin Nash the head booker job. After Ric Flair then turned heel the next month, WCW television ratings spiraled into a freefall that it would never ever recover from. Goldberg would receive a couple of WCW World Heavyweight Championship shots a couple of days after losing the belt to Kevin Nash at Starrcade. Most historians and insiders basically blame Kevin Nash and Hulk Hogan for not only ruining Goldberg's WCW World Heavyweight title reign by undermining him at every juncture, but booking Goldberg to lose the title and his streak to harm his drawing ability. The three-way bouts that also featured the recently returning Bam Bam Bigelow would see Goldberg land his finishing moves on the Bammer, only to be shoved out of the way and have the pin stolen by new champion Kevin Nash. Goldberg wasn't pinned, but he lost the matches. It cannot be harped on enough how new Booker Nash would seemingly do his best to take focus away from Goldberg and other draws like Sting, in order to focus on himself and his friends. Case in point, the NWO reunion and Goldberg revenge on the group was almost immediately forgotten, and Bill was taken out of the world title picture for months. It would take until April for Goldberg to get another shot at the gold, which predictably ended up in a no contest. 2 weeks later, DDP and Goldberg went to, you guessed it, a no contest 3 weeks later. Another four-way for the big gold belt took place on WCW Nitro in Gainesville, this time featuring WCW champion Sting defending against DDP, Kevin Nash and Goldberg. We will gloss over that Sting defeated Diamond Dallas Page earlier that night in a near 20-minute match that tore the house down for the clean win, only for a four-way to be booked for an hour later. For the finish, Goldberg was taken out by Macho Man Randy Savage for whatever reason. Then Savage tossed brass knucks to DDP, who then struck Nash to regain the WCW World Heavyweight title he lost less than 2 hours earlier to kill off any interest the fans might have had in a Sting title run. Another hallmark of Nash's booking was that he would switch title belts between wrestlers more often than he changed his leather wrestling chaps, a surefire way to kill interest in a wrestling company. Once again, Goldberg didn't eat the pin, but he didn't win a match that went to a conclusion, so therefore it counts as a loss. This time it's a disqualification loss thanks to Hollywood Hulk Hogan interfering with a steel chair, attacking Rick Steiner on the outside, then Sid Vicious in the ring. Legendary as Hulk Hogan's chair shots were, these ones were particularly harmful to Goldberg's win-loss record. Goldberg had once again won the WCW United States title a day earlier at WCW's Halloween Havoc pay-per-view. Goldberg would also wrestle WCW World Champion Sting that same event. This is significant because Goldberg pinned Sting clean in just over 3 minutes and was even handed the WCW World Belt. Here's the catch though, he was awarded the physical belt, but the commentators repeatedly claimed it was a non-title match. The next night on Nitro, WCW Commissioner J.J. Dillon agreed with Sting's assertion that the bout was non-title, but that he was stripping Sting of the belt, and a 32-man tournament would immediately commence to crown a new champion because Sting attacked the referee the night before. Now all this is by the by, as that night Goldberg wrestled and lost to Bret Hart in only his second ever televised pinfall loss. For some unknown reason, referee Mickey J was grabbing away at Bret Hart's arm while Bret had Goldberg in a perfectly legal sleeper hold. Ref goes down and Sid Vicious and Kevin Nash and Scott Hall run down to give Goldberg a giant 3-man beating for what seemed like an eternity. Bret Hart, who had also been down for an excruciating amount of time, suddenly rose up and pinned the comatose Bill for the most tainted of victories. Oh, and didn't we mention, Goldberg's US title that he won the day before was also on the line in this world title tournament bout. Classic WCW. Another four-way match with a bunch more tedious WCW-style shenanigans. Bret actually grabbed the belt first, but referee Kevin Nash walloped him with a baseball bat and basically handed the belt to Scott Hall. With Goldberg and Bret Hart having an alliance of sorts at this time, Bill went to check on his friend while Scott Hall and Kevin Nash slunk away. Some speculate that the reason Goldberg didn't win that night was because he'd already wrestled about an hour earlier, defeating Sting in 2 minutes and 16 seconds. Once a marquee mega main event match, now that was reduced to a throwaway segment because, well, if you couldn't tell, the WCW Brain Trust were beyond incompetent. We are now in a near streak of losses for Mr. William Goldberg. However, in this match, the newly face-turned Sid Vicious took the pinfall after, of all things, an elbow drop. Now Now, the story of this match, aside from the fact that it was god-awful, was Scott Hall doing a really obvious blade job right in front of the camera, except for the fact that he didn't. He actually just mimed slicing his head open with a razor blade, but he didn't actually bleed because there was no razor blade. He just thought it was funny to do a Lou Albano impression, we guess. Anyway, Jeff Jarrett simply walked through the cage door with weapons and hit guest referee Roddy Piper, who was covered in mud from previously refereeing a mud wrestling match between Miss Elizabeth and Rhonda Singh. In the melee, Chris Benoit pinned Scott Hall. Goldberg also get hit by a guitar, but this being Goldberg, fans figured he would no-sell and destroy Jarrett. But no, as part of the neutering process of the Bill Goldberg character, he was not only getting the loser's share of the purse every week, but he was also being made out to be just as human as everybody else. So no information is out there other than Bret went over on Bill. We can only presume many shenanigans took place, but we don't even know if Goldberg was pinned or lost some other way. That being said, Goldberg wouldn't have to wait long to be pinned by Bret. Bret and Bill lost the WCW Tag Team titles they won from Creative Control only 6 days earlier. Bret had been attacked backstage prior to the match, but as is the way, you either wrestle or you forfeit, so Bret and Bill went to the ring anyway. As Goldberg was busy killing Scott Hall, Kevin Nash downed Bret and got the pin. You see, Goldberg was actually in the ring the entire time, he just apparently couldn't be bothered to turn around and see Bret being pinned. This is the infamous match, the bout that ended Bret Hart's career. You most likely know the story, but for the uninitiated, Goldberg, who had a well-earned reputation for hurting his opponents as well as himself, was roughing up Bret during the entire match. An early interaction that saw Bret Hart apply his ring post figure 4 leg lock variant, a truly preposterous move that couldn't possibly be done without the cooperation of the opponent, saw Goldberg fail to hold Bret's ankle, leaving Bret's head to go nowhere but down hard onto the floor. Most likely concussed already, Goldberg soon had Bret in the middle of the ring calling spots. Strange, because actually it should have been Bret, who was the ultimate ring general, being the one calling the match. Goldberg curtly told Bret, "Watch the kick." What kind of kick? Well, Bret would only have a second to find out. Goldberg whipped Bret into the ropes, and with only taking one step after rebounding, Goldberg threw a stiff kick straight to Bret's forehead, whiplashing his head violently backwards and severely concussing the hitman in the process. Bret did instinctively bring his hand up in an effort to protect himself, but Bill launched the kick with such force it didn't make a difference. But that's what not this video is about. In what seems like an almost bizarre afterthought compared to the real-world consequences, Roddy Piper just wandered out in a referee shirt, and with Bret still applying the sharpshooter leg lock to Bill, Roddy Piper called for the bell and walked off with the WCW World title. So, apparently, Bret won. By submission? But if you thought this was the last of Goldberg losing to Bret Hart, then think again. Despite an effort to explain what happened at Starrcade, the next night's talking segments on WCW Monday Nitro made things not really any clearer. To keep a long, befuddling story a bit shorter, former WWF lead writer turned WCW lead writer and on-screen protagonist Vince Russo claimed he came up with the Montreal Screwjob, and this was a sort of redo of it to make it up to Bret for screwing him over 2 years earlier. In all of this convoluted nonsense that further drove WCW fans away from the product, Bret would wrestle Goldberg one more time. Unlike the previous night though, nobody in the audience cared about the match, which is just as well, because almost immediately the referee was knocked down and Scott Hall and Kevin Nash sauntered down to ringside with a bat. They teased hitting Bret before obviously hitting Goldberg, because everything in wrestling at that time was a swerve. Piper, who had just screwed Goldberg the night before, came out too early to make the save, and nobody knew what to do, as Roddy Piper had been instructed to stay on Goldberg as a human shield at all costs. So instead of Bret Hart, who had vacated the WCW World title that night out of disgust, pinning Bill to regain the big gold belt, referee Billy Silverman just ended up counting to 3 with Roddy Piper on top of Goldberg instead. At this point, the ref might as well have just crowned Roddy Piper the new WCW World Champion for all the sense WCW was making at the time. So Bret and the Outsiders and Jeff Jarrett and later some others reformed the New World Order to the delight of nobody. Then Bret had to retire 2 weeks later because he continued wrestling after suffering a severe concussion at the feet of Goldberg out of a misplaced sense of duty to the company. Multiple concussion syndrome, Decades of health worries, including a major stroke, followed for Bret, but Goldberg was almost even more unfortunate. The following night at the WCW Thunder taping that aired on Thursday, this was due to be Goldberg being scripted to attack a limousine allegedly containing the NWO members, by the way. Bill accidentally dropped the metal pipe he was meant to use to bust out the glass right before, and instead used his bare arm. The lacerations were so deep that he severed nerves and arteries, and not only nearly died, but was lucky to not have to have his arm amputated. Goldberg spent 6 months on the shelf. Still, at least Scott Hall didn't spray paint Goldberg's head this time, mostly because Jeff Jarrett was the one with the spray can. After less than a month back on the active roster, Goldberg once again came up short in a WCW World title match to Jeff Jarrett. Goldberg superkicked Kevin Nash and Jeff Jarrett fell on top of Nash for the pin. All the while Goldberg was stood right there watching. This wasn't a tag team match, keep in mind. The story being told was that Goldberg didn't want the WCW World title, what's meant to be the most coveted prize in the company, because he simply wanted to destroy Nash and Scott Steiner. Goldberg then flexed and roared as the show went off air. Just as an aside, the 250th Nitro, Goldberg did not win a Battle Royal, but we aren't including those. Jeff Jarrett snuck the pin on Kanyon after Goldberg speared Kanyon. At least this time, Scott Steiner pulled Goldberg out of the ring instead of Bill just standing there and watching. One of the more egregious defeats on Bill Goldberg's resume, Booker T was the WCW World Champion at this point in the "it's your turn to hold the belt this week" kind of era of WCW. But one thing that people forget about the 5-time WCW Champion Booker T is that pretty much every single one of his WCW Championship reigns were actually laughably embarrassing. Sure, the number sounds impressive, but aside from imitating The Rock at every single turn, including the shirts and the Uranagi rock bottom finisher, Booker T was portrayed as a total chump throughout, basically lucky to have a belt at all. His title defense against Goldberg is a prime example. In the sizzling 3-minute Nitro match, Goldberg beat Booker T almost to death, busting him wide open before cinching in the saddest, most technically inept looking armbar you've ever seen the side of a Billy Gunn match. Commissioner Ernest the Cat Miller, keep in mind the first man to claim to defeat Goldberg, then said that Bill Goldberg won the match but not the title because Booker T's brother Stevie Ray may have thrown in the towel to signify surrender. Booker T himself did not submit, and therefore the WCW title cannot change hands. This all despite the fact that his brother clearly submitted on Booker T's behalf. But I hear you cry, that means Goldberg won that match. Well, you're right, but that also doesn't mean that they didn't wrestle for the WCW World title again later that same night. Come the coldly anticipated rematch, the Cat decided he was going to be the referee for this bout and kicked Goldberg in the head. Goldberg shrugged it off and threw Cat out, but when Booker T kicked Bill and landed his bookend finishing move, Booker actually pinned Goldberg's shoulders to the mat for the 3 count. Even with all the extracurricular activity, this was only the 3rd time Goldberg's shoulders were ever counted down on television by the person who was meant to be pinning him. Sorry, Roddy. This is the shoot match. You know, the one where there would be no script. Yes, on a wrestling show they said everything else was fake, but 3-way title matches between Kevin Nash, Scott Steiner and Goldberg would be real. Then they went out there and had their regular fake-looking match that looked like all the other fake matches. What was real here were all the injuries Goldberg went into the show with, as he had fallen off his motorbike in Sturgis, South Dakota, and was covered in road rash and bruises. Anyway, keep in mind that this match was a shoot. Kevin Nash had Goldberg ready to give a powerbomb, but Bill uncharacteristically shoved Nash away, stood up, and then walked out. Vince Russo, fresh after being removed and then rehired as WCW's head of creative, told Goldberg to get back in the ring, but Goldberg said, "What are you going to do about it?" and strolled out. You see, Goldberg had refused to go up for Kevin Nash's powerbomb because this was a shoot and this was real. The commentators, including Tony Schiavone, who by 2000 had 0 credibility, and Mark Madden, who never had any credibility, then talked about Scott Steiner and Kevin Nash having to improvise a finish because Goldberg leaving wasn't, this is a quote, part of this design. Anyway, Steiner took the powerbomb and the commentators praised Steiner's professionalism for going up for the move. If you're wondering why WCW was intent on making you feel stupid for watching fake wrestling by reminding you it's fake every 12 seconds while being painfully unentertaining, then just remember WCW lost nearly $70 million in 2000 and was sold off in March of 2001. In the unforgiving triple-tiered steel cage that flopped around whenever somebody was thrown into it, the heroic heels Kevin Nash, Jeff Jarrett, Scott Steiner, and non-wrestler Vince Russo took on the babyface team of Booker T, Goldberg, Sting, and the tag team of Chronic. Yes, the babyfaces outnumbered the heels essentially 5-3. To nobody's surprise, we are sure, the three-tiered cage, which also featured on the all-time Rotten Tomato film Ready to Rumble, featured a belt dangling high above all three cages. The rules were the first person who walked out the cage with the belt won it. But there was the battle of going and getting the belt, and then of course handcuffing your opponents to the cage or the ropes. Hang on, no, actually that wasn't a rule, but there sure seemed to be a lot of restraining of wrestlers going on, but that's beside the point of this match. Apparently you couldn't just climb the outside of the cage and get the belt, or climb the inside of the cage and grab the belt and then climb down to the floor from the outside because, anyway. Goldberg was handcuffed to the ring ropes, but due to his mighty strength and the fact that they were obviously fake handcuffs, he broke free, only to attempt to leave the cage and get the door slammed in his face by Bret Hart. This is the same Bret Hart, by the way, that Goldberg legitimately ended the career of, who returned in a physical angle to cost Bill the win. Now, obviously, this interference could never actually lead to a match because Bret couldn't wrestle, so there was actually no realistic prospect of making any money due to Bret's actions. In late 2000, there was really only one match of any genuine intrigue left thanks to creative bludgeoning of formerly money-drawing characters like Sting and Ric Flair and The Outsiders, etc. That was Goldberg versus Scott Steiner, the two meanest, strongest, most authentically terrifying individuals in the company. Against all odds, WCW managed to largely not ruin the match either, as Bill and Scott had a strong-style barn burner in Buffalo that nearly went 14 minutes, a marathon match by Goldberg standards, before the usual screwy finish of course bogged down proceedings. Vince Russo ran in with a baseball bat but was halted by Goldberg. While pinning Russo down to the canvas, Steiner hit Goldberg with what was allegedly a lead pipe but sounded suspiciously like a block of rubber spray painted grey. Steiner then put the comatose Goldberg in the Steiner recliner, Scott's version of a camel clutch, and the referee called for the bell. As surprising as this may sound, the match was actually no disqualification, and therefore Scott won the match cleanly. The WCW Sin pay-per-view is only remembered for one thing, and that is Sid Vicious being forced by WCW management to do a flying kick off the top rope and snapping his leg clean in half in the process. However, WCW Sin also has another claim to infamy. This show featured Goldberg's final loss in WCW. In fact, it was Goldberg's final match in WCW as well. In the match, where if Goldberg lost, he had to retire. Bill actually took the pinfall instead of his tag partner, Dwayne Bruce, while facing the dastardly team of Buff Bagwell and Lex Luger. Totally Buff was their name. Rather than a dyslexic billionaire playboy turned crime-fighting Capes Crusader as the name might suggest, Bruce was actually a very short, very stocky, very short-tempered journeyman wrestler who was also the head trainer down at WCW's power plant training facility. Instead of training most of the guys who applied and met the criteria, Dwayne and co systematically tried to run everybody out the door with boot camp style over-exercise and demotivational screaming. With these training tactics, they very much saved themselves from developing some future talent via this method, including Dave Bautista and UFC star Chael Sonnen. That being said, Goldberg had boundless energy and, as a former NFL player with the Atlanta Falcons, could take everything that Dwayne and co could dish out to him. Bill and Dwayne struck up a friendship that eventually became an on-screen tag team in the dying days of WCW. Once again, this was a terrible way to showcase Goldberg, and nobody gave a rat's ass about Bruce, whose greatest claim to infamy beforehand was being part of the Dungeon of Doom faction as Braun the Leprechaun. Anyway, the match itself was a lot of fun when Goldberg finally got the hot tag. Goldberg ran over both guys, but then got maced in the face by a fan at ringside. Earlier in the day though, a backstage vignette with Goldberg, Flair and a fan took place, with Ric Flair then telling Goldberg the match was no disqualification. With Goldberg incapacitated and Dwayne Bruce dead on the outside after taking a sustained beating, Goldberg was pinned after taking chair shots and both Buff Bagwell and Lex Luger's finishes. A ridiculous finish on an otherwise very good show. WCW were few and far between with good shows in their dying years, and Goldberg, who was taking time off to heal some injuries, accidentally adhered to the retirement stipulation as WCW was sold to the WWF in March of 2001 before Goldberg had any chance of returning to the ring. To the consternation of nobody, we're sure Triple H would be the first person to defeat Bill Goldberg in WWE. Vince McMahon and co had already done such a horrible job of debuting Goldberg on WWE television that he was basically just another guy within a month, and a short while later he was taking losses to the Raw brand's champion Triple H in untelevised matches. Goldberg and Triple H had a genuine animosity toward each other for years beforehand, thanks to some choice words Triple H had regarding Goldberg's near-death limo smashing experience. In a nutshell, Triple H said Bill was faking the injury. Hunter also said that the WWF wouldn't want Goldberg because he was too limited, and the two found themselves at the same Toy Fair convention sometime later, with Goldberg challenging Triple H to a fight and Triple H wisely ignoring him. "I wanted to rip his face off," Goldberg would later say of the future WWE Chief Creative Officer. Hunter's face would remain on his skull, however, throughout their feud in the summer and autumn of 2003, as the two buried the hatchet almost immediately upon Bill signing with the WWE. As for the loss itself, Goldberg was low-blowed and schoolboy pinned by Triple H after interference by Ric Flair and Randy Orton. Kind of tame, really, considering Goldberg used to take chair shots to the head without flinching, but WCW had started the process of chipping away at everything that made the fans love the Goldberg character, and WWE was merely finishing the job. In a further sign of things to come, Goldberg slipped off the middle rope while posing for fans on a live episode of WWE Raw the day after, causing fans to laugh at him and for Bill to become even more angry than usual. Thankfully, the camera happened to be shooting Triple H and his Evolution faction buddies at that time. The two would have a dark match 8 days later, with Randy Orton quickly interfering for the DQ. WWE were trying to get Triple H and Goldberg in the ring as much as possible before their big WWE SummerSlam World Title match, but Triple H re-injured his groin despite the limited ring time, necessitating a change to the SummerSlam 2003 card. On another note, in the WWE press conference hyping up their upcoming World Title match at SummerSlam 2003, Triple H verbally tore Goldberg down instead of building him up, telling the media that Goldberg basically sucked and that Goldberg only beat The Rock several months ago because The Rock had one foot in Hollywood and he wasn't at his best. Whatever. With Triple H's severely strained groin, the Goldberg vs Triple H singles match was changed to an Elimination Chamber match, also featuring Shawn Michaels, Chris Jericho, Kevin Nash and Randy Orton to carry the load. Triple H was also last out of his pod and worked a grand total of less than 2 minutes before bonking Goldberg on the head with a sledgehammer while Bill was mid-spear. Because Elimination Chamber matches are no disqualification, this counts as a clean pinfall of sorts. So anyway, why would the World Heavyweight Champion, who had to bring in 4 extra guys to work the lion's share of the match, who could barely get himself to the ring and had to wear special biker shorts to strap up his groin, still win the match? Well, if you don't know the answer to that one, you don't know the legend of Triple H. To Hunter's, or more specifically the real person Paul Levesque's credit, he continued to work for nearly a month after the injury, before finally relinquishing the WWE version of the big gold belt to Goldberg the following month at the WWE Unforgiven pay-per-view that September. No cheating, no shenanigans. If you don't count booking yourself into a 3-on-1 handicap match a shenanigan. Goldberg succumbed to Randy Orton's RKO, Batista's powerbomb, and of course, Triple H's pedigree finishes, allowing Triple H to get the pinfall on the once indestructible Goldberg. I'm sure you'll all be just stunned that not only was there a triple threat match booked so that Triple H could regain the World Heavyweight Championship, but it was Goldberg that took the pinfall. Triple H had apparently decided that all of the Evolution members needed to win belts, and because Hunter only works the main event, that meant that the big gold belt was coming home to Stamford, Connecticut. Kane chokeslammed Goldberg, but before he could execute the pin, Batista dragged the big red monster out of the ring and then cleared the way for Triple H to steal the victory. It has to be said that Kane's chokeslam was not only his secondary finishing move, it didn't even look all that great, especially compared to the Big Show's. So Goldberg took a secondary finisher and then apparently died. Brilliant. The title switch was actually planned for the month prior at Survivor Series 2003, but with Triple H filming a bit part in Blade Trinity, Goldberg kept the strap for another month. In another fun fact, at nearly 20 minutes, this is Goldberg's longest career match. Why WWE kept pushing for Bill to have longer matches was anybody's guess, as Goldberg worked best in short, explosive bursts, give the fans what they want, and then leave. Goldberg expressed his frustrations after getting back to the locker room, essentially tearing the place apart at how he was being booked. Unsurprisingly, in a conversation with Vince McMahon the next day, he told the WWE head honcho that he didn't understand the Bill Goldberg character and that he shouldn't be selling so much, he shouldn't be working such long matches or losing too often, and that it was hurting his appeal. Bill was absolutely right. Annoyingly, Vince has always had a very specific WWE style he likes all his independent contractors to work. Babyfaces sell a lot before the comeback. That's it. This would be Bill's final regular match he would lose before leaving WWE in March 2004. His final match was a surprise victory over Brock Lesnar. Surprising because Goldberg was leaving and therefore it would make sense for him to do the honours on the way out. Less surprising because Brock Lesnar was also leaving WWE after that match due to the hectic travel schedule and being miserable on the road. WWE figured that they had a better shot at retaining Goldberg, so Bill ended up winning a match so bad that it has gone down in lore as one of the highest profile stinkers in WWE history. Sadly for Goldberg, it wouldn't be his only time receiving that rather ignominious distinction. After a rather limp and flaccid WWE run where he was chewed up and spat out by Triple H and the WWE machine that refused to let him do what he does best, Goldberg swore off wrestling entirely for over a decade. Bitter and cynical over the business, Goldberg changed his tune in 2016 when he re-signed with WWE because his son wanted to see him perform live for the first time. Goldberg's 2016-2017 run was far better, despite only lasting a few months and wrestling in 4 matches total actually. Goldberg bulldozed Brock Lesnar at Survivor Series 2016 in less than 90 seconds, blitzed Kevin Owens in just 22 seconds to win the WWE Universal title, a controversial move considering Bill's advancing age and relative limitations compared to his prime, before tackling literally Brock Lesnar again at WrestleMania 33. This time the match went a shade under 5 minutes, but that's all it needed to be. In classic Goldberg fashion, Bill turned back the clock to deliver a number of spears, including one through the barricade surrounding ringside, before Brock Lesnar leapfrogged Goldberg to avoid another spear. Bill's head crashed into the middle turnbuckle, a favourite spot of Goldberg since the WCW days, and Brock went to town. Or should it be City? Suplex City, to be precise. A number of German suplexes on the former Atlanta Falcon and a final F5 finisher move in the middle of the ring saw Brock Lesnar effectively become the first ever person to pin Bill Goldberg in the middle of the ring cleanly and fairly on a broadcast television show. No outside shenanigans, no weapon shots that were okay because it was like a no DQ match. A clean win for the Beast Incarnate after losing clean twice to Goldberg on previous occasions. While some had figured that at the age of 52 Bill Goldberg was finally done wrestling, it proved not to be the case when Bill returned in 2019 to face The Undertaker in a legitimate dream match. A nightmare is what it could more accurately be described as though for all who watched it. Neither Goldberg nor The Undertaker were, to put it politely, firing on all cylinders that night. Bill had done his usual pre-match ritual of headbutting the lockers backstage and knocked himself goofy. Then Bill gave himself a legitimate concussion early in the match after going for the same spear in the middle turnbuckle. A groggy Goldberg took a disgraceful chokeslam before the dead man dropped Bill on his head on the tombstone piledriver. Things went from worse to even worse when Bill got Undertaker up for his patented jackhammer suplex slam, only to drop Undertaker right on his head and neck. Goldberg then screwed up his own attempt at a tombstone piledriver before The Undertaker took the match home with a second, poorly executed chokeslam and a clean pinfall victory. However, in this match there were no winners, and that includes the fans. At that stage of the game, with a combined age of 106, both legends really needed fresh legs to be able to pull off a match of this magnitude safely. The COVID-era WrestleMania held in WWE's Orlando-based training center was really something to behold. No fans, no noise, no fancy effects, no hoopla. Just a weird, sterile atmosphere in a hollow, empty room where every wrestler appeared to be doing their best not to feel stupid wrestling in front of black curtains in their underwear to deafening silence. As far as big WrestleMania matches go, Drew McIntyre vs Brock Lesnar on day 2 was the marquee world title match. On day 1, Goldberg returned to defend his newly won WWE Universal title. Incredible that WWE quite frankly gave him the belt again after nearly murdering The Undertaker the year before, against Braun Strowman. In barely 2 minutes, Braun Strowman landed a running power slam and caught the clean win on Bill. The match sucked, But I mean, how could it do anything but suck given the circumstances? And looking back on it, Braun Strowman really didn't deserve to hold such a prestigious title either, considering he's just been fired. Despite his size, Strowman has always been a mid-tier player at best, and remains a lone blip in the WWE Universal's otherwise illustrious run as a recognised WWE Championship during its 8-year existence. Now, with fake, pumped-in crowd noise and a sea of LED boards displaying the faces of fans, and occasionally more tasteless images like Chris Benoit or ISIS or signs saying Fire Velveteen Dream, at least there was less of an awkward atmosphere compared to WrestleMania 36's absolute silence. The 2020s version of Goldberg, aside from being older and more human, also apparently has no problem losing to WWE talent cleanly. Drew McIntyre, who had been WWE Champion through nearly all of the COVID era up to that point, put Bill Goldberg away clean with his Claymore kick. A fun fact is that Drew McIntyre's Claymore kick was a happy accident because it was actually meant to be a big boot. Drew just kind of fell over delivering it once and it looked good. After Bobby Lashley slapped his Hurt Lock, aka the Full Nelson, on Bill's son, Pappy Goldberg challenged Lashley at WWE SummerSlam 2021. This is what fans want to see. Massive powerhouse monsters slugging it out. It worked with Scott Steiner, it worked with Brock Lesnar, and it worked with Bobby Lashley. Although the fans in Paradise Nirvana clearly didn't get the memo that Goldberg was meant to be the good guy. Once again, with fans allowed back into the building, SummerSlam 2021 saw Goldberg suffer a storyline leg injury that hampered him to the point he was unable to stand, thereby forcing the referee to call off the bout and hand the win to the almighty Lashley. Bobby, being a good bad guy, beat the crap out of Bill with a chair after the bell rang, then put the Hurt Lock on Bill's son Gage one more time. Exactly 2 months later, Goldberg would gain a measure of revenge by defeating Lashley in Saudi Arabia. There's something about Saudi Arabian-based shows that just brings out the absolute worst matches from these legends. Goldberg had COVID 3 weeks before the match as well when he was asked to appear, but WWE were in such a bind and needed a big star, so Bill agreed. Also, that Saudi Arabian 7-figure payoff certainly probably would have proved enticing for effectively 6 minutes worth of work. Effectively, a battle between the greatest spear in history, Goldberg, versus one of the worst spears in history, Roman Reigns. The two ended up working a guillotine choke on Goldberg, choking out the now 55-year-old man. With this match being the last on Goldberg's existing WWE contract, and because he dug Vince McMahon out of a hole at the last minute, Bill figured WWE were going to reciprocate the favour and either re-sign him or give him the big retirement match send-off he'd been asking for. And one more loss to add to the list. Goldberg took the fall one last time in his so-called retirement match on the revived Saturday night's main event against WWE World Heavyweight Champion Gunther. Gunther gave Goldberg, with his glaring physical limitations, about as good a 15-minute match as it was possible to have with the 58-year-old at that point. The match ended when Gunther locked in a sleeper, and rather than tapping out, Goldberg went to sleep. After the bout, Goldberg, surrounded by dozens of his friends and family, gave a retirement speech in the middle of the ring, of which only about 20 seconds of it actually aired on NBC. The rest of the speech would be posted for free on WWE's YouTube channel, which turned out to be not good enough for Goldberg. Goldberg then went on a press tour complaining about WWE's treatment of him, and then declared he wanted to have another retirement match because he wasn't happy with his performance. Goldberg gonna Goldberg right up until the end. At least with this video, the outro isn't going to cut out just as soon as it starts.